Hey everybody, Crow back again, and I've recently played all the games in this Evercade cartridge. This is Gaelco Arcade 2. There are 6 games included, all from Spanish developer Gaelco, all originally released from 1991 through 1996. As with every Evercade release, the cartridge comes in a clamshell case, along with a full-color manual, and as a bonus, we're getting a couple of double-sided mini posters, much like what was included in Gaelco Arcade 1. Now, as usual, I'll talk about each game individually, and then I'll rank the games, and then I'll rank the games compared to all previous Evercade games, and then I'll finally rank the cartridge against all previous Evercade cartridges. So, let's get started with the earliest game and proceed in order of release. We start out here with one of Gaelco's earliest games, Big Karnak from 1991. The Pharaoh's wife is kidnapped, and he immediately embarks on a journey to rescue her. For the most part, this is a hack-and-slash platformer, but it's also pretty unconventional for that genre. Controls are what you would expect. An 8-way directional joystick and 2 buttons, one for attacking and one for jumping. You'll wield a few different weapons throughout the game, but these aren't power-ups where you get to choose what you want to carry. There's somewhat of a narrative going on here as you progress through the game, and new weapons are usually acquired at the end of the level, and you just start the next level with that weapon, and the levels are designed around the weapon that you have. Another difference is the fact that the bosses just don't show up at the end of the level. Sometimes they're in the middle, and in some cases a boss is right at the start of the level. Some levels even have multiple bosses you'll encounter throughout. The pyramid itself has 2 or 3 bosses you'll have to work through before making it out, and that's on top of the puzzle elements the pyramid provides. What's interesting though is before you enter the pyramid, the game will provide you with a scroll that has 4 clues on how to make it through. The funny thing is that if you perform the wrong action on one of these puzzle elements, it can lead to an instant death. My favorite is where you have to spell the word Gaelco to continue, but if you're not careful and accidentally spell the word dead, well, you die. That actually cracked me up. This game really knows how to change things up throughout, and as a result, nothing really feels repetitive as you work your way through. The final level alone doesn't really mess around with too many minor enemies and will mostly be boss battle after boss battle until you win the game. There's the lady with the anchor, the man-eating plant, the giant octopus, the face of the doorway, and of course the 2 forms of the final boss. Throughout the game there are items you can pick up, such as health or items for points, but possibly most important are the hourglasses. Each level is timed, but picking up an hourglass will give you more time. Well, to be honest, I don't really know how critical it is because I made sure to pick up every hourglass I could, and I never even came close to running out of time. Anyway, I really like this one, and it's a great way to start this collection off. You know, it seems like tennis was a fairly common sport that would be made into a video game a few decades ago. Well, it seems like Gaelco wanted to be a little bit different when they released squash to arcades in 1992. It's sort of like tennis, but with a wall. Part of the reason tennis was so common a sport to see as a video game was because it's a simple game and just about anyone can pick up and play it without really needing instructions. It's all pretty intuitive. Move the joystick to move your player, 1 button for a soft hit, and 1 button for a hard hit. And despite the fact that squash looks a bit different than tennis, it's still a pick up and play kind of game since the controls are no different than what they'd be for a tennis game. Even the rules are pretty similar. The only real difference is that you and your opponent play in the same area, and every time you hit the ball, it has to hit the wall in the designated area, and then it's your opponent's turn to hit the ball, which must be done before the ball bounces on the ground twice. And then when he bounces the ball off the wall, then it's your turn, and so on and so on and so on. Scoring is a bit more straightforward than tennis though. If you hit the ball out of bounds, or fail to hit the ball before it hits the ground twice after hitting the wall, then your opponent scores a point. The first one to 9 points wins. However, since this is an arcade game, there's a bit of a monkey wrench thrown in there if you're playing against the computer. Every time your opponent scores, you'll earn a fault. If you earn 5 faults, then you'll have to insert a coin to continue. If you beat your opponent, you'll get 2 faults removed before continuing to the next match. You'll beat the game when you beat 5 opponents. I honestly can say I like this game. I like most tennis games from the time, and despite the changes squash provides, the gameplay still feels a lot like a tennis game. There are a lot of little touches this game has that I really like, such as the characters' reactions after each score and the way the crowd gets up in the foreground and cheers their player on. It does feel like there's a little bit missing though. There are only 2 arenas in the game, depending on if you're playing a qualifying round or if the game is in the finals, and although there are 8 characters from different countries to choose from, I think they all play exactly the same, and you can't even tell what country anyone is from once you start playing, so you might as well just pick your favorite color. Also, I think you're supposed to be able to direct where you want to hit the ball, but I just felt like that was something out of my control. Regardless though, this game is simply fun to just pick up and play. In the Gaelco Arcade 1 collection, we got Thunderhoop. So of course, in Gaelco Arcade 2, we would need to get the sequel, TH Strikes Back, aka Thunderhoop 2, which was originally released in 1994. The game takes place 10 years after Thunderhoop defeated Professor Genbreak from the first game, and in the time since then, he's amassed an army of mutants, women, and mutant women, and is now on the attack out to steal the Thunderhoop DNA. However, what he may not have realized is that Thunderhoop is now 10 years older and more powerful than he's ever been. As such, this is a completely different type of game from the original. That was more of a slow-paced platformer, whereas this one is more of a fast run-and-gunner game, more in line with something like Contra. The art style has been massively overhauled as well, and it actually kind of reminds me of the arcade version of Battletoads. As you run and gun your way through the levels, you'll pick up projectile weapons and shields, but mostly just points. The game is very forgiving and will let you continue right where you die, most of the time. The only exception to this are the areas where you have to ride a platform dodging obstacles and shooting monsters on the track. These sections will send you back quite a bit if you lose a life while riding them. When you lose all your lives and choose to continue, it's the same deal. Hell, the game doesn't even reset your score when you continue. The game was pretty fun to play, although it was rather weird to watch every enemy blow up and explode into bloody chunks whenever they were hit. Even weirder is that most of these enemies were women, though I'm sure that these are genetically engineered clones that Genbreak had created. One thing I'm kinda disappointed in is the lack of weapons that you can collect, like from the first game. Instead, you're stuck with the same projectile the whole game, though you can level it up twice. But for some reason I don't quite understand, your upgraded projectile will downgrade automatically over time. I'm not really a fan of these timed power-ups. There's also a glitch that will occasionally happen if you use the Evercade save state feature. I guess it depends on where you perform the save, but when you reload an affected save state, most of the level's enemies just won't appear, letting Thunderhoop run through uncontested. Eventually the enemies will begin appearing again. It's extremely odd, and as a result I tried to avoid using save states at all for this one. This is certainly an entertaining game to run through, and it even has a few straight-up shoot-'em-up segments for a change of pace. However, I don't believe this one requires as much skill to play as the original does. This one is here for just straight-up action. Next is Touch and Go from 1995, and from the title alone, I would have never guessed that this was a volleyball game. Well, I suppose that's because I never really played volleyball professionally or in a learning environment. Touch and Go actually refers to a type of volleyball drill where each team consists of 3 people on a shortened court, and every time a player touches the ball, they must go and touch the end line. Now this game has nothing to do with that, as this is just beach volleyball. It's like they heard the term touch and go was related to volleyball and just called the game that without knowing what it actually refers to. Regardless, I believe this is now the 3rd beach volleyball game on the Evercade, and it plays generally the same way the others do, except that each team starts the match with 11 points, making each game shorter. Well, it's understandable since a full-length volleyball game might take up too much time for an arcade game. Out of the 3 Evercade beach volleyball games, this one is probably the simplest to play. You only need to worry about controlling one player, as your teammate will always be controlled by the CPU. And aside from the movement with the joystick, there is only one button that does everything. The game is also very unforgiving in your position related to the ball. As long as you're in the general area, your character will hit the ball, and you don't even need to hit a button for that. You'll automatically pass your teammate with a bump if it's the first hit, a set if it's the second hit, and if it's a third, you'll just bump it over the net nice and easy. But what you really want to do is get set up to spike the ball, which will require you to hit the button to jump, and hit the button again to spike, along with pushing the joystick to indicate the area you want to aim for. The button is also used for diving and serving, as well as jumping and blocking, and that about covers all the controls. It's very simple. If playing single player, you'll choose from one of 8 teams and work your way through beating all the other teams, although the opposing teams will really ramp up in difficulty about halfway through, as it'll be harder and harder to catch them off guard and also become harder to block their spikes or even just catch the ball before it hits the ground, as they will be more adept to hitting areas you aren't covering. If you lose a match, you'll have to insert another coin to continue. If playing a 2-player match, you'll both play on opposite teams. Although this game seems like it would be perfect for 4 players, nope, it doesn't work. Which is kind of silly because I checked out the operator's manual and there's a dip switch setting that allows for 4 players 2 different ways. Turns out you can link 2 of the arcade machines together, but there's also an option for 4 players on a single machine, and it works. I tested it myself in MAME, but it doesn't appear like those settings are used for this game on the Evercade, which I feel is a missed opportunity here to allow 4 players to play in the Evercade VS. The last thing I want to mention here is that the game seems rather grounded in reality. We have well-animated digital people playing a realistic-looking version of beach volleyball, which is why it blew my mind when I got to perform a super spike that saw my player fly high up into the air and spike the ball so hard that it was impossible for my opponents to counter. Especially also because this isn't documented anywhere. Not in the Evercade manual, not in the operator's manual, not on GameFAQs, nowhere. I kept looking because I didn't really know what triggered it, and my best guess is that the ability appears when you spike the ball 5 or 6 times in a single rally. It just then automatically happens the next time you go to spike the ball. My only guess as to why this ability is in an otherwise grounded game is because this is an arcade game, and if no progress is being made because each team is consistently countering each other and keeping the ball in play, this super spike ability comes into play to put an end to the rally and lets the game progress. Gotta keep things moving, because the more time players hog the machine, the more potential revenue that's lost. I know I've already gone on longer than I wanted to about this game, but I also need to mention how much I enjoyed the way the girls come onto the screen in celebration whenever a match is over. Would you believe me if I told you that World Rally 2 Twin Racing is the 1995 sequel to Gaelco's World Rally Championship from 1993? Well, probably, since the game looks the same and has practically the same name followed by the number 2. But what you may not know is that this is the only game in the collection that wasn't developed by Gaelco. Like a handful of other Gaelco releases, this game and its prequel were developed by Ziggurat Software, another Spanish game developer. At first glance, World Rally 2 looks nearly identical to its predecessor, which had already been included in Gaelco Arcade 1 for the Evercade. There's still 4 courses with 3 sections each, though these are different courses than the first game, but each section still needs to be completed within 60 seconds to proceed, and it's using the same isometric perspective, and the controls are still left, right, and acceleration. So what's different? Well, the game's subtitle is Twin Racing, and this is an indication that 2 players can now play, only it's not possible in this Evercade version. The 2-player mode is only accessible by linking 2 arcade cabinets together. With only 1 arcade cabinet, or in this case the Evercade, it's only a 1-player game like the original. The only real noticeable difference here, other than the courses, is that you can now choose from one of 3 vehicles instead of being stuck with the same one every time you play. However, there's no indication if there are any differences between these vehicles other than the way they look, but I have a theory on this I'll get to shortly. Just like the first game, you'll have to power slide your way around corners as cleanly as possible, as sliding too much or brushing against the walls will slow you down, making it more difficult to finish each section within 60 seconds. Sometimes I would finish over the 60-second time limit, despite not crashing or bumping into the walls, but just because they slid the car too much or took corners more cautiously than I should have. The game not only wants you to drive perfectly, but also at a high speed, otherwise you ain't progressing. But after you fail, trying again is just as simple as inserting another coin. Now, I really enjoyed the first World Rally game, and I didn't really start having problems completing each race within the time limit until the more difficult sections near the end of the game. But I was having problems with this one much earlier on supposedly less difficult courses. It took me a while to figure out why, but I think I've come to the conclusion that the road type affects your turning ability more so than the original game. As you progress throughout the game, the road type will constantly be changing, sometimes multiple times in one race. As such, your timing for turning each corner has to take into consideration your speed, the angle of the turn, and also what type of road you're driving on. Now, I will say that this is all my speculation. This may not be the case at all, and it's just my imagination, but it certainly felt like if I stuck to the same rhythm of turning throughout each race, I was more likely to eventually turn too early or too late. Again, it being the road type is just my speculation, but I had to think of a reason why the game felt more difficult than the previous one. Oh, and the difference between the three cars? My guess is that they each handle differently depending on the road surface, which could actually make things more difficult if you like changing which car you're driving every time you play. Despite all that though, I still really like this game because it's still really satisfying when you're just flying through the track. Our last game in the collection is Maniac Square, which was released in 1996. And it's a puzzle game that I find a little reminiscent of Sega's Columns. The only difference really is that there are 2 pieces at a time that fall instead of 3, and you can rotate the connected pieces instead of cycling the order of them. Still though, creating a line of 3 or more like pieces will cause those pieces to be eliminated and drop the pieces above it. If the pieces left on the screen reach the top, the game is over. However, there is one additional twist here. You are given 60 seconds to clear a certain number of lines. Doing so will reset the timer to 60, and the number of lines you must clear is increased, as well as the falling speed of the pieces. If you run out of time, you can quote-unquote insert a coin to continue, and the timer will reset to 60 and you can resume right where you left off. The game is over for good though if the pieces reach the top of the screen. There's also a 2-player competitive mode, but I didn't really play it. All it looks like though is that the 60-second timer is removed and whoever can last the longest wins. I only played this one in single-player mode and I found it to be an okay game, but it also left me questioning certain things regarding the design of this game, such as the whole design being around the number of lines eliminated within a time limit. At its core, it's not really a bad idea. Line up 3 pieces, they're eliminated, you score 1 point, and you're 1 line closer to finishing the level. So what happens if you line up 4 pieces? Well, they're eliminated, you score 1 point, and you're 1 line closer to finishing the level. I was kinda surprised that you don't get anything extra for eliminating 4 pieces, despite it being more difficult. 5 pieces in a line? Nope, same thing. Feels like there's a missed opportunity to create an incentive for pulling off more difficult line eliminations. And combos? Nope, still 1 point for each line eliminated. The craziest the game ever gets is the Joker block that occasionally appears, and that's kind of like a wild card, but that's it. The controls for the game are left, right, and down to move the falling pieces, and a button to rotate it clockwise. But you know what would have come in handy? A button to rotate the piece counterclockwise. That would have been really useful in later levels when the pieces start falling incredibly fast and you've got a short window to rotate them. Well, at least it makes the game end before it gets too boring. Hold on a minute, we ain't done yet. It turns out there's a hidden game in this cartridge. Now there are plenty of other hidden games to find in the Evercade VS and presumably the Evercade EXP when it's released, and if I ever get caught up with making videos for each cartridge, I'd like to talk about those. But this one is a little different as it's the only hidden game so far tied directly to a single cartridge. Now unfortunately this won't be possible on the original Evercade handheld because to access the game requires the L2 and R2 buttons. But if you select Maniac Square as your game and before hitting the play button you hold down the L1, R1, L2, and R2 buttons for a second or two, the game will change to Maniac Square. However, this is the prototype version from 1992, 4 years prior to the actual release of Maniac Square. Now normally I'd say it's interesting that there's a playable prototype of a game hidden, but why talk about it like it's a completely different game? Well, that's because it kinda is. I mean, yeah, sure, it's still a puzzle game where two pieces fall and you can rotate them, still only one way though, and try to line up three or more to make them disappear. But everything else is different. The screen will always show play areas for two players, even if only one player is playing. The background music is completely different, and I actually like it a lot more. Sound effects are different as well. When the pieces are eliminated, they explode instead of popping. The game still progresses by eliminating a set number of lines per level, but here there's an actual score, and eliminating 4 blocks at once is worth more than just 3. Every time you eliminate blocks, you earn a spot in the color stacks for that color, and if it reaches the top, you earn the ability to eliminate all the blocks of that color whenever you want to using a second button. There are now metal blocks that appear that cannot be removed through ordinary means, and also versions of the colored blocks with black backgrounds. These act like regular colored blocks, except if they are eliminated in a row of 4 or more, they let out a pattern of explosions, which is different depending on the color. These explosions are the only way to eliminate those metal blocks. But each level starts with a predetermined block layout, so technically the metal blocks will reset anyway once the level is completed. The 60-second time limit per level doesn't exist here, so it's not something you need to worry about. And if the blocks reach the top of the screen, you can use a credit to continue from the beginning of that level again with your score intact. I only played until around level 12, but I have reason to believe that the game has 30 levels because the faux DMD screen will occasionally say, "Complete 30 levels," in between other messages and animations. Now, being a prototype, this game definitely has some room for improvement. I mean, this version of the game doesn't even have a title screen. But I'm not quite sure how they went from this to the released version of Maniac Square in 4 years. It seemed like they stripped everything out that made the game even remotely fun, and added a timer to force you to finish levels in 60 seconds or make you insert another coin to continue. Alright, let's rank these games. I'm going to start with my least favorite and go up to my favorite. And my least favorite was Maniac Square, not the prototype version, the actual release version. This was actually my least favorite game in this collection. And I'm going to put this on C because it's kind of really a bland puzzle game. There's not really much going on, and that time limit is kind of annoying. So let's move on. What's in our number 6 spot? We're going to go with Touch and Go. Not that I thought it was bad. In fact, I'm going to rank this all the way up on A. I thought it was a really fun game, but yeah, just a lot of other good games on this collection. So Touch and Go is going to be in my number 6 spot. Number 5, we're going to say Squash, right above Touch and Go. These two games are actually very similar in terms of how much fun they are. They're both sports games. They're both very easy to play, and they're pretty solid games. Although they're kind of lacking in a little bit of you're just lacking a little bit of something. So next up, let's go with number 4. We're gonna go with the Maniac Square prototype. Yeah, this was a hidden game, but I found it way better than the original Maniac Square. Again, I'm going to put this up on A because it is fun. You throw in all those power-ups and everything, and you've got a way more interesting game than this. So it's kind of weird how they took a game that was like pretty damn decent and kind of like stripped all the fun out of it over 4 years before they released it. So kind of weird, huh? In my number 3 spot, I'm going to go with TH Strikes Back Thunder Hoop 2, and I'm going to put this all up on the S level. Now, I almost put this on the A level, just because it really doesn't, to me, it doesn't really require that much skill to go play through the game, but I decided to bump it up a notch just because it is well animated, the graphics are really sharp. It did have that feel like kind of like Battletoads in a way, just over-the-top action. Next up, in my number 2 spot, I'm going to go with World Rally 2, and I'm going to put this up on level S as well. I think, again, World Rally, the original one, I think I had that up on the double S level, but I don't think I'm going to put World Rally 2 up above it, just because, yeah, it's almost practically the same thing. In fact, you have the bonus of 2 additional cars to choose from, even if you are lacking that 2-player ability. But it just felt like this game was a little bit harder to play. It was a little bit more inconsistent, and I think it was just because of and just in my theory, that the road types really affected your cars differently. So, and since the road types are changing throughout the sections you're playing, it can be hard to gauge your timing from turn to turn. So, I mean, that's just, maybe it's all in my head, I don't know, but it just felt like I had a better time with World Rally than with World Rally 2. And then finally, of course, in my number one spot, I'm going to go with Big Karnak. Now, I wanted to put this on the double S level, but I'm going to bump this up to the triple S level. And the reason I'm doing this is because I really couldn't think of anything I could have done to like improve the game. And when I mean improve the game, I mean, or let me put this another way. There's nothing I would change about the game. Okay, I think the game is really good and almost perfect the way it is. And I couldn't talk myself out of not putting it in triple S. I mean, there may be a time where I think of something and be like, oh, okay, you know, this could have improved Big Karnak. Let's bump it down a notch. But for right now, I'm going to put this at the top at triple S. Alright, so let's rank those games in Gaelco Arcade 2 against all the other Evercade games individually. So we'll start with my least favorite, Maniac Square, which I would put on a level C. So let's see where I'd put this. Alright, I think I'm settling here just above, I think this is Darwin 2047 or something. I can't remember exactly the name of that game. And California Games, right under California Games for the links. I think that's a good spot for this. So next, let's go with Touch and Go, which we're going to put up on A level. I think I'm going to put Touch and Go right above Burnin' Rubber for the NES and right under Thin Ice for the Intellivision. Next, Squash, also on A level. Got to go above Touch and Go. So I have a feeling it's going to be pretty close because I kind of felt exactly the same way for both games. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to put Squash right above Touch and Go. To me, they're just almost inseparable. All right, next up, we got the Maniac Square Prototype. Again, on A level, got to go above Squash. You know what? I think we're just going to put it a hair over Famicom Galaga, but not over Top Racer or Top Gear, as it was originally known. And then next up, we got TH Strikes Back Thunderhoop 2 on S level. So, where are we going to put this? I think that's where we're going to settle this. TH Strikes Back is right under Water Margin, right above Princess Quest for the Intellivision. Next, World Rally 2, also on level S. Gotta put it above Thunderhoop 2. You know what? I think I do have to put this above Mountain Madness Pro, but I don't think I could put it above Valis 3. So we're going to settle World Rally 2 under Valis 3, but above Mountain Madness. And then finally, Big Karnak. We're going to put this on triple S. But you know what? I don't think it's going to be very high on triple S. As matter of fact, I could barely put it on triple S. I couldn't think of a reason to put it on double S. So I think we're going to put this on the lowest spot on triple S. And in fact, if it does drop down, it would be a high double S. But for right now, I'm going to leave it on triple S. And to matter of fact, I haven't actually moved anything yet, but out of any of this stuff. So, but again, that might happen sometime in the future, and that's why, you know, I like doing it this way, because, you know, this isn't set in stone or anything. If I feel like something is misplaced, I will move it. But again, with Big Karnak, I'm going to leave it on triple S until I can think of a reason to put it on double S. It was just too solid a game. I wouldn't change anything about it. And finally, we're going to rank the collection itself, Gaelco Arcade 2, against all the other collections. Where we want to put this? Let's see. Gaelco Arcade 1 I have as my favorite collection, period, out of all of them. It's on triple S. Now, I don't think this is a triple S. Definitely not. There's a triple S game, but then we drop down to single S's, and then there's a couple A's. Do I want to put this on level double S? No, you know, I think it's going to be on single S, where I put a lot of these collections, apparently. Did I think it was better than Gaelco Arcade 1? let me put this here temporarily and think about that. You know, I'm looking at the rankings I gave Gaelco Arcade 1 and the rankings I gave Gaelco Arcade 2 are very similar. We've got 1 triple S, 2 double S's, except here Gaelco Arcade 1 has 4 A's, whereas Gaelco has 3 A's, but then it has a C, and then Gaelco has a D. But we can't hold that D against it. It's like if it wasn't there, I would say that Gaelco is a hair better than the Gaelco Arcade 1. So that's, I think, where we're going to put it. I think on level S, Gaelco Arcade 1, just a little bit above Gaelco Arcade 1. There you go. And that's going to wrap it up for Gaelco Arcade 2. Next, I'm going to be working on the C64 Collection 1. And haven't really looked at any of this stuff on here yet. I've played some of these games way back when, especially the Epix games. So it'll be fun revisiting those. 14 games, so it may take me a while. But that's what I'm going to go with next. So see you next time. Bye.